Did you know that some of the world's most famous celebrities had their graves dug up after death? From shocking secrets to hidden mysteries, today we reveal the untold stories behind these exhumations. Eva Perón, the iconic First Lady of Argentina, had her grave exhumed multiple times due to political reasons. After her death in 1952, Eva's body became a symbol for her supporters. However, in 1955, a military coup overthrew the government, and the new regime feared her grave would inspire unrest. To prevent this, Eva Perón's body was secretly removed and hidden for many years. In 1957, her remains were moved to Milan, Italy, where they were kept hidden under a false name. Then, in 1971, her body was moved again to Spain, still kept out of public view. Finally, in 1976, after decades of secrecy, Eva's remains were returned to Argentina. She was laid to rest in the family mausoleum at Recoleta Cemetery in Buenos Aires, where her grave became a place of pilgrimage for many Argentinians. This story shows how even after death, political forces can impact the legacy and resting place of famous figures like Eva Perón. Her grave's exhumation is a tale of mystery, power, and respect for a beloved national icon. Lee Harvey Oswald is a name forever linked with one of the most shocking events in American history, the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in 1963. Oswald was arrested and later killed by Jack Ruby, but even after his death, controversy and conspiracy theories continued to surround him. In 1981, almost 2 decades later, Oswald's body was exhumed from his grave in Texas. The reason? Many conspiracy theorists doubted whether the body buried was actually Oswald's. The authorities decided to conduct a thorough investigation to confirm his identity once and for all. During the exhumation, forensic experts collected samples for DNA testing. This was a significant step, as DNA testing technology was still in its early stages at the time. The tests conclusively confirmed that the remains were indeed those of Lee Harvey Oswald. This exhumation helped put some doubts to rest, but debates about the assassination and Oswald's role continue to this day. It remains one of the most fascinating and mysterious chapters in American history. Salvador Dalí, the famous Spanish surrealist painter, is known worldwide for his eccentric art and personality. However, even after his death in 1989, mysteries surrounded his legacy. In 2017, Dalí's grave was exhumed following a shocking claim. A woman came forward, asserting that she was Dalí's biological daughter. To settle this dispute once and for all, Spanish authorities approved the exhumation of Dalí's remains to conduct DNA testing. The process involved carefully removing his body from his tomb in Figueres, Spain, and collecting samples for analysis. The DNA results were surprising. The woman was not Dalí's daughter. This revelation dismissed the claim and clarified the painter's family history. The exhumation sparked worldwide media attention, highlighting how even decades after death, famous figures can still be at the center of unexpected controversies. Dalí's exhumation reminds us that behind the fame and glamour, stories of mystery and truth-seeking continue to unfold. It's a powerful example of how science helps solve puzzles about history's most intriguing personalities. Yves Montand was a famous French singer and actor, well known for his charm and talent. However, years after his death in 1991, his grave became the center of a surprising controversy. In 1998, a woman claimed to be his daughter and demanded a DNA test to prove her relationship with Montand. To resolve this claim, French authorities decided to exhume Yves Montand's body. The exhumation involved carefully removing his remains from the cemetery to collect DNA samples. This was a delicate and sensitive process due to Montand's celebrity status and the respect for his family. After the DNA tests were conducted, the results were clear: the woman was not Yves Montand's biological daughter. This conclusion helped settle the dispute and brought closure to the matter. Yves Montand's exhumation shows how, even years after death, public figures can be involved in unexpected stories. It also highlights the power of modern science in revealing truths and protecting legacies. Jesse James was one of the most notorious outlaws of the American Wild West, a bank robber, gang leader, and a legend in his own time. Officially, he was shot and killed in 1882 by Robert Ford, one of his own gang members. But over a century later, some began to question whether Jesse James had really died that day. In 1995, researchers and historians launched an investigation to uncover the truth. Rumors had long circulated that Jesse James had faked his death and lived under a different name. To settle the mystery, his grave in Missouri was exhumed for forensic testing. Scientists collected bone and teeth samples from the remains. These were then compared with DNA from Jesse James's living relatives. The results were conclusive. The remains in the grave were indeed those of Jesse James. The exhumation helped lay to rest a popular conspiracy theory and confirmed the historical record. Even in death, Jesse James managed to keep people guessing, proving that legends never fade easily. King Richard III of England ruled from 1483 until his death at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485. His death marked the end of the Plantagenet dynasty and the rise of the Tudors. For centuries, the location of his grave remained a mystery. Many believed he was buried hastily in an unmarked grave, lost to history. That changed in 2012 when archaeologists began excavating a car park in Leicester, England, the suspected site of Greyfriars Church. To the world's amazement, they discovered skeletal remains believed to belong to Richard III. His body had been buried under the church, which was later destroyed during the Reformation. The skeleton had severe scoliosis and battle wounds consistent with historical accounts of Richard's death. DNA testing was conducted using samples from living descendants of Richard's family. The results confirmed the identity. It was indeed King Richard III. This remarkable discovery solved a 500-year-old mystery and allowed for a royal reburial. In 2015, Richard III was laid to rest in Leicester Cathedral with full honors, finally receiving the dignity denied to him in death. Christopher Columbus, the famous explorer credited with discovering the New World in 1492, died in 1506 in Valladolid, Spain. But his final resting place has remained a subject of mystery and debate for centuries. His remains were moved multiple times, from Valladolid to Seville, then reportedly to Santo Domingo in the Caribbean, and later to Havana, Cuba. After Cuba's independence, the remains were supposedly returned to Seville. The confusion deepened in 1877, when a box labeled with Columbus's name was found in Santo Domingo, suggesting that his bones had never left the island. This led to a major historical dispute: were Columbus's true remains in Seville or Santo Domingo? To solve the mystery, in 2003, Spanish authorities exhumed the remains in Seville to perform DNA testing. They compared the bones with those of Columbus's brother, Diego. The results matched, confirming that the remains in Seville do, in fact, belong to Christopher Columbus. Despite this evidence, some still believe part of his remains might be in the Dominican Republic, keeping the legend, and the debate, alive. Charlie Chaplin, one of the most iconic figures in film history, passed away in 1977 and was buried in the quiet village of Coursières-sur-Vevey, Switzerland. However, just a few months after his death, in March 1978, a shocking incident took place. Two men dug up Chaplin's coffin and stole his body, hoping to demand a ransom from his grieving family. The thieves, both from Eastern Europe, contacted Chaplin's widow, Una, and demanded a large sum of money in exchange for the return of the body. She refused to pay, insisting that Charlie would have thought it ridiculous. After a 5-week investigation, Swiss police tracked the culprits down and recovered Chaplin's remains from a field near Lake Geneva. Following the recovery, Chaplin's body was reburied, but this time, with extra protection. His grave was reinforced with concrete to ensure it could never be disturbed again. This bizarre crime shocked the world and reminded everyone of just how deeply loved, and even targeted, the legendary comedian still was, even after death. Francisco Franco, the former dictator of Spain, ruled the country from 1939 until his death in 1975. For decades after his death, his body was buried in the Valley of the Fallen, a massive monument he had constructed during his regime. The site became highly controversial, as many saw it as a symbol of fascism and oppression. In 2019, after years of public debate and legal battles, the Spanish government decided to exhume Franco's remains. The goal was to move him to a less prominent burial site, reflecting Spain's commitment to historical memory and the victims of Franco's rule. The exhumation was a historic moment. Covered by international media, it marked the first time a modern European nation removed a dictator from a state-sponsored monument. Franco's body was reburied in a private family plot in Madrid, away from national honors. This decision was part of a broader movement in Spain to reckon with its past and to honor those who suffered under Franco's dictatorship. For many, the exhumation was not just symbolic, it was a step toward justice and reconciliation. Marie Curie, the legendary physicist and chemist, was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, and remains the only person to win Nobel Prizes in two different scientific fields, physics and chemistry. After her death in 1934, she was buried alongside her husband, Pierre Curie, in a small cemetery in Sceaux, just outside Paris, but in 1995, more than 60 years later, the French government made a historic decision. To honor her groundbreaking work and lasting legacy, Marie Curie's remains, along with Pierre's, were exhumed and transferred to the Pantheon in Paris. The Pantheon is France's national mausoleum, reserved for the country's greatest heroes. This reburial marked an important milestone. Marie Curie became the first woman to be laid to rest in the Pantheon based solely on her own achievements. Her exhumation wasn't driven by mystery or scandal, but by deep respect and recognition. Even today, her contribution to science and humanity continues to inspire generations. Moving her to the Pantheon ensured that her name would forever be remembered among France's most honored figures. Che Guevara, the Argentine revolutionary and symbol of global resistance, was captured and executed in Bolivia in 1967 after leading a failed guerrilla campaign. Following his death, his body was buried in secret by the Bolivian military to prevent his grave from becoming a political shrine. For 30 years, the exact location of Che's body remained unknown. But in 1997, a joint team of Cuban and Bolivian researchers discovered a mass grave near the Bolivian town of Valle. Among the remains, they identified Che Guevara's body through dental records and physical features. His remains were carefully exhumed and flown back to Cuba, where they were received with national honor and emotion. A grand ceremony was held, and he was reburied in a specially built mausoleum in Santa Clara, the city where he had once led a decisive victory during the Cuban Revolution. The exhumation was not just a recovery of a body, but a symbolic act, restoring a revolutionary icon to the land he helped shape. Today, his final resting place remains a major pilgrimage site for admirers around the world. Virginia Clem Poe, the wife of legendary American writer Edgar Allan Poe, lived a short but significant life. She married Poe at the age of 13 and remained his closest companion until her early death from tuberculosis in 1847, at just 24 years old. At the time of her death, she was buried in a small, unmarked grave in Fordham, New York, where the couple had briefly lived. For decades, her resting place remained relatively unknown, far from the legacy of her famous husband, who died 2 years later and was buried in Baltimore, Maryland. However, in 1875, Poe's admirers and literary societies decided it was only fitting that the two be reunited in death. Virginia's body was exhumed and transferred to Baltimore, where she was reburied beside Edgar Allan Poe at Westminster Hall and Burying Ground. Her reburial was a symbolic act of love and recognition, honoring the emotional bond that had existed between them in life. Today, visitors to Poe's grave can see the couple reunited, side by side, a final chapter in one of literature's most tragic and haunting love stories.